It was early October, around the time when the night started feeling heavier and the fog rolled thicker across the highways of Wyoming. I had been on the road for 12 straight hours, hauling refrigerated goods from Denver to Spokane. It was the kind of route that tested your patience, not just because of the endless stretches of darkness, but because of how lonely it got once you passed Casper and the last hint of city lights faded in the rearview mirror. I'd been driving trucks for over 15 years by then, and I thought I had seen just about everything a long-haul driver could encounter: whiteouts, runaway animals, burned-out wrecks on the shoulder. But that night, something was waiting for me on the road that would change how I looked at driving forever. The night started off normal. The hum of the engine was steady, and the CB chatter was quiet. I had my thermos of coffee half empty, my dashboard lit just enough to see my gauges, and the occasional flash of headlights from oncoming semis. The highway was quiet, open, and endless. Around midnight, the fog thickened to a kind of wall, the kind that forces you to slow down even when your instincts tell you to keep moving. My eyes were strained from the glare bouncing back off the mist, and I started counting the reflective posts to stay focused. That's when I first saw him. It was right near mile marker 197, just past a small turnout where truckers sometimes stopped to rest. A figure appeared on the shoulder, barely visible at first. I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me, but as I rolled closer, I saw a man standing there in a dark jacket, holding something in his hand. Looked like a small bag or a toolbox. He didn't wave or move. He just stood still, facing the road. Hitchhikers weren't uncommon, even in those lonely parts, though not usually that far from town and definitely not at that hour. I slowed a little, just enough to get a better look. Something about him made me uneasy. His posture was off, too stiff. He wasn't walking or looking around. He was simply there, like he had been waiting. The fog swirled around him as if it was clinging to his shape. I passed him slowly, eyes glued to the side mirror, and for a brief second, I could swear I saw his head turn slowly, following my truck as it went by. It gave me chills, but I kept driving. I didn't stop. Not for a stranger on a foggy Wyoming highway at midnight. About 5 miles down the road, I started to feel something wasn't right. The unease grew into something colder. My truck's interior lights flickered once. I thought it was just the wiring acting up again. It happened sometimes when the air got damp. Then I caught something in the corner of my right mirror, a flicker of movement. It was faint, like a shadow running along the side of my trailer. My first thought was that maybe a coyote or stray animal had gotten too close, but it was too fast, too deliberate. It kept pace with me for a few seconds, then vanished. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was the fog playing tricks on me again. An hour later, I pulled into a small rest stop near the state line. The lot was empty except for one old RV parked under flickering light. I parked, killed the engine, and sat in the silence for a minute. My hands were trembling a little from the tension of driving through the fog. I decided to stretch my legs, stepping out into the cold air that smelled faintly of rain and diesel. The world was completely quiet, no wind, no sound but my boots on gravel. I walked around the truck, checking my tires, my lights, and the rear latch. Everything looked normal except for one thing. There were wet footprints leading from the back of my trailer toward the darkness behind the lot. I froze. The footprints were human, bare, and spaced unevenly, like someone had been stumbling. I followed them with my eyes until they disappeared into the fog, just beyond the reach of the parking light. My pulse quickened. I didn't hear anything. No movement, no breathing, but that silence somehow made it worse. I backed up slowly, eyes darting between the fog and the dark outline of my trailer. After a long moment, I climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, and told myself to forget it. Maybe it was old moisture, maybe an illusion, That's what I wanted to believe. When I woke up, it was around 4:30 a.m. I hadn't meant to fall asleep, but exhaustion must have taken over. The fog had thinned, and a dull gray light was spreading over the highway. I rubbed my eyes and looked in the rearview mirror and froze. The back doors of my trailer were slightly open, swinging just enough to catch my attention. My heart started racing. I knew for certain I had locked them. I climbed out, cautiously walking toward the rear with my flashlight trembling in my hand. The cold morning air bit through my jacket as I shone the light at the latch. The lock was still there, but it was twisted, bent at an angle, as if someone had tried to pry it open from the inside. When I finally opened the doors, my stomach dropped. There were long streaks of muddy handprints along the interior walls of the trailer, dragging from one end to the other. No footprints, no belongings, just those handprints, each one smeared downward as if someone had been crawling along. My cargo was untouched, but the marks were fresh and wet. The smell inside was faintly metallic, like old rust mixed with rainwater. I backed out and closed the doors, trying to steady my breathing. I radioed dispatch to report the latch damage, keeping my voice steady even though I could feel the panic rising. They told me to continue the route and get it checked at the next way station. I did as they said, but as I started driving again, I felt like I wasn't alone in that truck. Every sound, the creak of the suspension, the hum of the tires, felt wrong. Around dawn, I stopped at a diner off I-90 to get some coffee. When I stepped out, a state trooper parked nearby waved me over. He asked if I had seen anyone walking along the highway near marker 197 the night before. I hesitated, then said yes. He looked at me carefully before explaining that a man had been struck and killed by a passing semi in that exact spot the previous night, around midnight. I felt the air leave my lungs. The trooper said the body had been found hours later by another trucker. The victim's description matched perfectly. The jacket, small bag, everything. My throat went dry as I realized I had passed that same man just before midnight. When I asked if they knew which truck had hit him, the trooper said they weren't sure. The driver hadn't stopped. I didn't tell him about the footprints. I didn't tell him about the handprints inside the trailer. I just nodded, walked back to my truck, and sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. For the rest of that drive, I kept glancing at the mirror, expecting to see him again, standing on the shoulder, waiting for someone else to pass by. Months have gone by since then, but I still avoid that route whenever I can. Some nights, when I park at a quiet rest stop and the fog rolls in thick around the cab, I swear I hear faint tapping near the trailer, like someone trying to get back in. I tell myself it's just the wind, but every time I glance at the mirror, I half expect to see a man standing there at mile marker 197, waiting for a ride that never came. It was late July of 2016, the kind of southern night when the air felt thick enough to drown in. I was running a long route through Louisiana, hauling machinery parts from Houston to Tallahassee. I had been driving trucks for 8 years at that point, but that particular route had always made me uneasy. It cut through long, isolated stretches of swamp and bayou, with barely any towns or truck stops for hours at a time. The road was narrow, the trees pressed in close, and sometimes the fog off the marshes rolled in so suddenly it looked like smoke rising from the earth. That night, I left Lafayette just after 9 p.m., knowing I'd be driving straight through until sunrise. My dispatcher warned of storms further east, but I figured I could outrun them. The truck's cab smelled faintly of diesel and stale coffee, and the only sound was the low hum of the tires on the old two-lane blacktop. I remember how still everything felt. No movement on the road, no other headlights for miles. Just me, the truck, and the road winding like a black river through the trees. By midnight, the rain had started. It came slow at first, just a fine mist tapping against the windshield. But within half an hour, it turned into a full storm. The wipers struggled to keep up. I could barely see beyond the hood, and lightning flashed every few seconds, lighting up the swamp on both sides of the highway. The kind of storm that makes you feel like you're driving through someone's nightmare. I turned on the radio, trying to find some company in the noise. A talk show, a late-night station, anything to break that heavy silence that pressed in between the thunder. At first, there was only static. The rain was so strong it drowned out most signals. Then, without warning, the radio crackled and picked up a voice, faint, distant, like an old AM broadcast. I could barely make out what it was saying, but it sounded like someone reading a report or a log entry, calm and steady, as if from another time. The voice repeated a date, July 28th, 1983, and something about lost at mile 45. I figured it was just a recording bleeding through from some shortwave frequency, maybe a weather alert system. Still, it gave me chills. That exact date flashed on my dashboard clock as I glanced down. I reached to turn the radio off, but the knob wouldn't respond. I pressed it again, harder. Nothing. The voice kept repeating fragments. Mile 45, submerged, still searching. The static swelled and faded. Then the voice cut out completely. The silence that followed was worse. I told myself it was just a glitch, an old frequency bouncing off the storm clouds. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the voice hadn't been part of any broadcast at all. After about 20 minutes, the storm eased slightly. I passed an old exit sign. Most of the lettering was gone. Only 45 was still visible. My stomach twisted when I saw it. The number matched the one I had just heard on the radio. I tried not to think about it and focused on the road. The highway curved sharply there, following the edge of a flooded bayou. The water on the side reflected the lightning, glowing white for a split second each time it flashed. That's when I saw something that made my hands tighten on the wheel. A single set of headlights appeared up ahead, submerged, barely visible beneath the surface of the dark floodwater beside the road. They weren't on the highway. They were under it in the marsh. As I drove past, I could see the faint shape of a car beneath the surface, an old sedan, rusted, half buried in silt, with its lights flickering weakly, as if they'd just been turned on. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. I drove another half mile before I dared to glance at the mirror. The headlights were still visible behind me, glowing from under the water. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went pale. The radio crackled again. This time the voice came back, but clearer, sharper, like it was coming from right beside me. It repeated the same line. Lost at mile 45. My heart raced. I tried to pull the fuse for the radio, thinking that would shut it down. But even with the power off, the sound continued. The voice grew louder, distorted by static, now whispering something I couldn't fully understand. I could hear another faint noise beneath it, something like rushing water. A few minutes later, the rain stopped as suddenly as it had started. The air went completely still, too still for the aftermath of a storm. I passed a small, empty rest area, but it didn't look right. The lights were flickering, the asphalt cracked and swallowed by creeping moss. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I just wanted to reach the next truck stop, anywhere with people and noise and light. But the highway kept stretching on with no sign of civilization. At around 2 a.m., the radio finally went silent again. I was relieved, until I noticed something odd about the windshield. There were streaks on the inside, wet streaks, as though rain had somehow gotten in. I wiped at them with a rag, but they smeared red-brown, not clear like rainwater. My pulse began to pound. I flicked on the overhead light and saw faintly smeared across the inside of the glass, what looked like the outline of a handprint, pressed hard, sliding downward. I pulled over immediately, every muscle in my body shaking. I sat there trying to breathe, telling myself it was just condensation, dirt, or something from my glove. But deep down I knew it wasn't. There were 3 more prints on the passenger side, all faint, all pressed from the inside. I checked the locks. Everything was still sealed. I hadn't opened a window since Lafayette. When I finally reached a truck stop outside Baton Rouge at dawn, I jumped out the second I parked. The early morning light made everything look more ordinary, less haunted. I told myself the storm had messed with my head. I went inside, got some coffee, and sat near the window. But when I glanced back at my rig, I froze again. The windshield was perfectly clean, except for one word, written across the condensation from the inside. It said simply, "Found." I told no one, not the other drivers, not my boss. A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me, and I searched for accidents around that part of Highway 90. What I found made my blood run cold. On July 28, 1983, exactly 33 years before that night, a car carrying 2 men had been reported missing after heavy flooding near mile 45. The vehicle was never recovered, and both were declared drowned. Locals said sometimes, during big storms, drivers reported seeing headlights glowing under the bayou water near that bend in the road. I never took that route again. Even now, when I drive through a storm, I turn off the radio before the thunder starts. I don't like hearing static anymore, because sometimes, when lightning flashes just right, I think I can still see those submerged headlights blinking back from the darkness, waiting for someone else to listen. It was the middle of January, 2018, when I took the run that still haunts me. I had been driving long-haul freight for nearly 2 decades, and I had seen just about every kind of weather the Rockies could throw at a man. Blizzards, avalanches, black ice, even a few trucks overturned by the wind. But there was one road I always avoided when I could, Black Ridge Pass, a narrow mountain stretch connecting western Colorado to Utah. The route was old and unforgiving, full of steep grades, blind corners, and cliffs that seemed to drop straight into the clouds. Most companies rerouted their drivers during winter, but I had been late on deliveries all week and didn't have the luxury of choice. The pickup was in Grand Junction, and the drop-off was in Salt Lake City. Normally, that wasn't a bad run, but a snowstorm had been moving through since morning. By the time I reached the base of the mountains, it was after 9 p.m., and the snow was falling in thick, wind-driven sheets. The road ahead was barely visible even with high beams on, but I'd been through worse, or so I thought. The first 50 miles were slow but manageable. The radio was quiet, the heater on low, and the windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm. I kept my focus sharp, eyes shifting between the road and the mirrors. The snow made everything look identical, endless white, endless dark outlines of trees, and that faint shimmer of ice on the guardrails. Then I passed a yellow warning sign half buried in snow. Black Ridge Pass. Next 22 miles. Use extreme caution. It's strange, but the moment I saw that sign, a kind of heaviness came over me. The engine's hum seemed to deepen, and the night around me felt thicker, heavier, almost alive. I took a slow breath, shifted down, and started the ascent. The road narrowed the higher I went. My headlights bounced off thick snowflakes, swirling like ash. The storm was worsening by the minute, and I could barely make out the reflective markers on the edge of the pavement. The GPS lost signal halfway up. I knew the pass wound around the mountain in tight switchbacks, so I took it slow, crawling along at 15 miles per hour. The temperature gauge dropped below freezing, and the whole world outside the windshield turned to white noise. Around midnight, I saw the first sign of trouble. A dark shape appeared just ahead, blocking part of the road. I braked gently and rolled to a stop. It was a jackknifed semi. Its trailer skewed across both lanes. The cab's lights were off, no hazard flashers, no sign of anyone inside. The snow had already begun to bury it, which meant it had been there a while. I honked once, out of habit, but the sound went nowhere in that muffled storm. I edged around the trailer, careful not to slide, the right side of my wheels inches from the drop-off. Once I cleared it, I noticed something else. The snow on the ground showed tracks, not tire tracks, but footprints, bare footprints. They led from the jackknifed truck into the woods on the left side of the pass. I caught them in my mirror as I kept moving, and the sight made my stomach tighten. Whoever had been in that rig had walked out into the storm barefoot. I drove on, trying to focus on keeping control of the truck. The wind howled against the cab, rocking it slightly. Every few minutes, I caught movement in the edge of my headlights, a flash of white against white, something darting between the trees. Maybe it was wind-blown snow. Maybe it wasn't. I refused to slow down enough to find out. About 10 miles in, the fog rolled in, thick and opaque. I could barely see the hood. My GPS was still dead, and my odometer said I should have already reached the top of the pass, but the road just kept climbing. Then, out of nowhere, the fog parted for a split second, and I saw a bridge ahead. A narrow one-lane span stretching across a gorge so deep I couldn't see the bottom. The wooden planks creaked under my tires as I eased across. Halfway through, the truck's lights flickered once, then steadied. When I reached the other side, the road curved sharply left, hugging the cliff, and that's when I saw someone standing in the middle of it. A figure, thin, tall, wearing what looked like a trucker's parka, completely still in the blowing snow. My heart slammed in my chest. I hit the brakes, careful not to skid. The headlights caught the figure fully then, and I realized something was wrong. The man wasn't shivering, wasn't moving at all. His clothes were stiff, frozen solid. His face, pale and ice-crusted, was turned toward me, but his eyes were gone, just hollow dark sockets filled with snow. I couldn't breathe. I knew I had to keep moving, but for a few seconds, I just sat there, staring. Then, as the wind shifted, the frozen figure tilted, slow and unnatural, falling sideways into the snowbank like a mannequin. I pressed the accelerator and drove past as fast as the icy road would allow, not daring to look back. The next few miles were a blur. The storm seemed to grow worse, yet I couldn't find any sign of descent. It felt like I was trapped in that mountain, circling endlessly upward. My hands were numb on the wheel. Then I noticed something strange on my dashboard display. The outside temperature reading had dropped to minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit. That wasn't possible. Even in the Rockies, it never reached that low without warning. The air inside the cab turned colder, breath visible in front of me. I reached for the heater control, but before I could, the radio, which I hadn't touched in hours, snapped on by itself. The static was sharp, like tearing metal, followed by faint breathing. Then, beneath the static, I heard something else, a voice. It was faint, but close, as if coming from the passenger seat. I turned slowly. The seat was empty, but the window beside it was frozen from the inside, frost-forming words that were hard to read. Only one word came through clearly. Turn. Every instinct in me screamed to get off that pass. I slowed to a crawl, and then, as if in response, the fog began to clear. I saw the faint glow of lights ahead, maybe from a small service area or a rest turnout. Relief flooded me. But as I got closer, I realized the lights weren't electric. They were lanterns, dozens of them, lining both sides of the road in perfect symmetry. Their flames burned steady in the windless cold. Beyond them stood figures, more of them, unmoving, spaced evenly apart. Some were wearing old trucking jackets, others in clothes that looked decades out of place. All of them were staring straight at the road, their faces pale, unblinking, snow gathering in their open eyes. I kept driving. I didn't stop, didn't blink, didn't breathe. The road seemed to stretch forever, lined with those lanterns and frozen figures. When I finally reached the end of the pass, the first light of dawn broke through the clouds. The road widened, the fog lifted, and just like that, the lanterns and the figures were gone. The road was empty again. I didn't stop until I reached a way station outside Green River. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely sign the log sheet. One of the inspectors asked if I was okay. I nodded, though I must have looked half frozen. Then he asked a question that made my blood run cold. He said another driver had come through Black Ridge past the week before and reported a wrecked semi near the top, the driver frozen solid beside it. They hadn't been able to recover the body yet because of the storm. I never told him what I saw that night. Never told anyone about the footprints, the frozen man, or the voice that told me to turn. But sometimes, when I check my truck mirrors during winter runs, I swear I see frost form on the inside of the glass. Just faint words melting away too quickly to read. It was August 2019, and the desert heat had turned the asphalt into a shimmering black mirror. I was running an overnight haul of dry goods from Albuquerque to Los Angeles, cutting through the long nothingness that runs west past Holbrook, Arizona. The route was straight and bare, a two-lane scar through sand and stone that felt like it hadn't changed since the dawn of time. Most drivers avoided that stretch after sunset. I didn't blame them. Out there, once darkness fell, the world turned into a flat, silent ocean with no horizon, and every mile marker looked exactly like the last. That evening, the sun was setting behind the mesas, turning the sky into stripes of red and gold. My rig, a long Peterbilt with worn tires and a lazy engine rattle, felt like a lifeboat in a sea of emptiness. I'd been awake for nearly 18 hours already, trying to make up for a late start. I had music playing low, just to keep my mind from drifting. The GPS said I'd hit Holbrook in about 30 minutes, where I could refuel and grab some coffee before crossing into the long desert run toward Needles. Everything was routine, until the sun finally dipped below the horizon and the color drained from the world. The temperature dropped fast, and a weird silence came over the highway. Even the wind seemed to vanish. I noticed the dashboard clock flicker once, but I didn't think much of it. When I looked up, the landscape had changed in a way that didn't make sense. The mesas that had been on my right were gone, replaced by a flat plain that stretched in every direction. I thought maybe I'd missed a turnoff, but the road was still straight, the same cracked asphalt with its fading yellow lines. Then the GPS signal cut out completely. I drove another 20 minutes, but Holbrook never appeared. No signs, no exits, no distant glow of gas station lights. Just black sky and my headlights cutting a narrow cone through the dust. The mile markers had stopped making sense too. I passed one that said 167, then another that said 167 again, identical in placement and distance. I slowed down, checking for any crossroad or pull-off, but the desert was empty. The first real sign that something was wrong came when I checked the clock again. It read 11:52 p.m. I drove for what felt like another hour, and when I looked again, it still said 11:52 p.m. The second hand wasn't moving. My phone battery was dead, though I charged it earlier. The world around me was locked in a kind of half-light, not moonlight, not headlights, just a faint silver glow that made the desert look flat and endless. I told myself exhaustion was playing tricks on me. Maybe I had nodded off, Maybe the heat was still getting to me. I took a long drink of warm water, shook my head, and kept driving. The road didn't change. The markers stayed the same. The odometer climbed, but the scenery never moved. The only difference I noticed was a dark patch on the pavement ahead, like a burn mark. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't on the road, but above it, a thick column of heat shimmer, or maybe smoke, swirling slowly upward into the night sky. The smell hit me as I passed through it. Sharp, metallic, and unmistakably burnt. The air inside the cab grew heavy, and the temperature gauge spiked for no reason. I pressed the gas to get out of it, but as soon as I cleared the haze, something new appeared in my mirror. Behind me, far down the road, there were headlights. 2 small points of white light, growing brighter. Relief hit me at first. Another truck meant I wasn't alone out here. But the relief faded quickly when I realized how fast the lights were closing in. They came up too fast, almost impossibly fast, yet I couldn't hear any engine noise. The lights drew closer, and when they should have passed me, they didn't. They stayed just behind, perfectly aligned with my trailer, never gaining or falling back. I watched them for miles, my knuckles locked around the wheel. Then, in a blink, they were gone. No turn, no fade, just gone. The rearview mirror reflected nothing but empty black highway again. My stomach twisted with unease. I decided to pull over at the next rest stop, but the road just kept stretching, mile after mile, with no signs, no exits, no sign of any human construction. The horizon began to glow faintly, but it wasn't dawn. It was a dim orange pulse that flickered like distant firelight. I slowed to 60, then 50. The glow grew stronger, and the air thickened again with that same metallic smell. The pavement beneath me had changed texture, rougher, grainy, as if the asphalt had melted and hardened again. I could feel a vibration coming through the pedals, irregular, like something alive moving deep under the road. Then I saw them. Figures along the shoulder. At first, I thought they were cacti or rock formations, but as the headlights swept past, I saw human shapes. Dozens of them. Some standing, some kneeling, all motionless, their skin gray and cracked like dried clay. Their faces were turned toward the road, eyes hollow and dark, mouths open as if caught mid-breath. I pressed the gas, trying not to look, but my eyes kept flicking toward them. They went on for nearly a mile, a silent line of people frozen in place, their shadows stretching and twisting across the desert sand. When the last one vanished in the darkness, I realized the orange glow ahead had turned red. It lit the edges of the horizon like the inside of a furnace. I drove toward it because there was nowhere else to go. The road ended abruptly at a massive fissure, a split in the earth, wide enough to swallow a house. Beyond it, nothing. Just that red glow pulsing from below, painting the desert in colors I can't even describe. I stopped the truck about 10 feet from the edge. The engine idled rough, coughing like it was choking on the air. The heat coming from the fissure was unbearable, burning my face even through the windshield. I sat there frozen, staring into that impossible light, until the dashboard flickered again. Every gauge dropped to 0. Every warning light turned red, and the digital clock still read 11:52 p.m. Then the radio turned itself on. It wasn't music or static this time. It was a low hum, deep and rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. The truck shuddered with each pulse. The steering wheel began to vibrate and sink. The hum grew louder, and for a moment, I thought I could hear faint whispers in it. Not words, just the rhythm of something human trying to breathe. I slammed the shifter into reverse and floored it. The truck jerked backward, tires screaming, and the red light began to fade as the fissure shrank in the distance. When I looked in the mirror, the headlights were back, the same pair, impossibly bright, following me. But this time, I could see the faint outline of the vehicle behind them. Not a truck, not a car, but something twisted and tall, metal fused with bone, its shape changing with every flicker of my brake lights. I didn't look again. I drove until sky finally began to lighten, until I saw the first green sign that said Holbrook, 6 miles. When I reached town, the clock jumped forward on its own. It read 4:12 a.m. I pulled into a truck stop, stumbled out, and nearly fell to my knees on the pavement. The air felt different there, normal again, warm, dry, and filled with the smell of diesel and dust. I went inside, grabbed a coffee, and tried to explain to the clerk what I'd seen. He told me something that made my blood run cold. He said every few years, a trucker came through claiming they'd gotten stuck on the stretch west of Holbrook that wasn't on any map. They always said the same thing. The clock stopped. The road looped forever, and the desert glowed red at the end. No one ever found the place when they went looking for it. I don't take that route anymore. If I have to cross Arizona, I stick to the main interstates. But sometimes, when I drive at night and the road seems too long, I see the numbers 167 flash on the dashboard, just for a second, and I feel the air go still again, as if the desert hasn't quite let me go. It was early March of 2014, and I was running a long haul from Amarillo, Texas, to Salem, Oregon. The drive stretched endlessly across cold desert plains and mountain roads, slick from melting snow. I had been trucking for 14 years by then, used to sleepless nights, bad coffee, and the silence that only comes when the world outside your cab is nothing but wind and road. But that night, somewhere in northern Nevada, I learned that not all silences are peaceful. Some feel like they're waiting for something to happen. I remember it vividly because I had just crossed the Utah border when my dispatcher texted that I had to stop at the next way station for an unscheduled inspection. Normally, I hated that sort of delay, but something about the night already felt off. The moonlight made everything look washed out. Hills like broken bones, the desert stretching forever, and my headlights cutting through empty miles. When I reached the station, there were no other trucks, no movement, and no sign of life. The way station sat alone beside a wide stretch of highway, half buried in sand and wind. Its lights were still on, flickering faintly in the storm gusts. I parked on the scale platform and waited for the usual green light, but nothing happened. Just the hum of my engine and that uneasy stillness. Finally, I decided to step out, thinking maybe the system was down or the inspector was asleep inside. The air was colder than I expected. My boots crunched on salt and gravel, and I noticed the small building's door was open slightly, like it hadn't closed right. When I pushed it open, the smell of stale coffee and dust hit me. The radio on the counter was playing static. Papers were scattered around, and one of the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed in a dying rhythm. I called out once, but no answer came, and the silence afterward pressed heavy on my ears. There were signs of someone having been there recently, half-eaten food, a steaming mug of coffee, but no person. A clipboard lay on the desk with inspection notes dated that same night. A truck's license plate was scribbled there, something starting with TX4. That was mine, but the inspection section was already filled out. My name, my company, my weight, all written down perfectly. The time recorded was 1:23 a.m. It was 1:23 a.m. right then. A chill ran through me so deep that my fingers trembled when I picked up the paper. My logbook had no note about prior inspection. No sign anyone had contacted me. I went back outside, glancing at my truck, still there, quiet and unmoving. When I turned to look back at the building, the flickering lights had stopped. Everything inside was completely dark. I got in the cab fast, locked the doors, and told myself it was fatigue messing with my head. Maybe someone had filled it out early, or maybe it was a system thing. I started the engine and waited for the green signal to go. After a moment, the light on the station board turned green by itself, glowing faintly through the wind. I drove off and didn't stop until I reached a truck stop about an hour away. When I went in to grab some coffee, I told another driver about what happened. He stared at me with a look that didn't need words. He said the way station I was talking about had been closed for almost 10 years. The inspector who worked there, a woman named Linda, had died in 2004 when a semi lost control and hit the building during a snowstorm. They'd never reopened it, just left it standing because removing it cost too much. I didn't want to believe him, but when I checked the map, there it was, listed as closed/out of service. The timestamp on my inspection sheet was still the same, my name printed neatly across it. I never found out who, or what, had written it. After that night, I noticed something whenever I passed through Nevada again. If I was on that stretch of highway around the same hour, my radio would hiss faintly with static. Sometimes, if I slowed down near where the old station used to be, I could see a faint green light flicker for just a second before fading away into the wind. I stopped doing night hauls after that year. I told people I was tired of the schedule, but the truth is I didn't want to see her again. Whatever happened that night felt too exact, too personal, like I had driven straight into a moment that wasn't meant for the living. Even now, when I think back on it, I can still smell that stale coffee and hear the low buzz of the broken light inside that empty way station. I don't know what keeps her there, checking paperwork in a building that doesn't exist anymore. Maybe she never realized the crash ended her shift. Maybe she's still making sure every driver gets cleared through, even those of us just passing through the dark. Because sometimes, when I dream about the road, I see her figure standing by the scale platform, clipboard in hand, her face half hidden by the flicker of light, and she's always waiting, like she's expecting me to stop again.